Welcome back to Mountain Bike Action. My name is JJ and today we've got another Garage Files for you. Now when you buy a new bike these days, it's no longer guaranteed that you're going to get either SRAM or Shimano brakes on them. In fact, TRPs are being spec'd on more and more bikes as more bikes come out. And at some point, you're gonna have to know how to bleed them. In this video we're gonna go over how to bleed the brakes and what you need to do it successfully. First, let's go over all the tools you'll need to successfully bleed a TRP brake. We're going to need some Allen wrenches to adjust and remove various things, some Torx wrenches to allow access to the bleed ports, a device to spread your pads, a bleed block or two, some isopropyl alcohol and some towels to clean with, a syringe and bleed cup for the oil, and some mineral oil. We're using Maxima's mineral oil because we know it's going to last a long time in our brake system. The brake that we're bleeding today is on my dirt jumper. Now it's been about 3 years since I bled this brake, so it's in need of a bleed. This is a Slate Evo, which is a little different than the DHR Evo or the Trail Evo, but the process is the same. I'm expecting some dirty oil out of this thing. The first thing we need to do is remove the back wheel. In this case, it's gonna take some force and an 8mm wrench. Now that we've removed the wheel, we need to do two things. We need to remove the pads and we need to push the pistons back into the caliper. I'm going to push the pistons back into the caliper while the pads are still in because it's pretty easy that way. You can get a nice clean push. But I need to actually release the tension on this so I can get my tool in there to actually do it. Here I'm using this little spreader side on this Feedback Sports tire lever, and I'm just gonna push it in there and leverage it very gently to the side. And there's one side, and there's the other. The pads are spread. Now we're going to remove the pin. Some pins have a little thing right here to hold them in place or to keep them in place in case they get loose, but this one does not. So all I have to do is take a 3mm and unthread it. There it is. And then these pads will come up through the top. There we go. And now we have free access to this caliper. Now we're going to take a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and a rag and just clean it up a little bit. Make sure everything's nice and good. We don't want anything to contaminate anything, and the sooner you start cleaning, the better, because that means no oil is going to get on the pads, thus ruining your braking experience. Now that we have cleaned the caliper, we can throw these two bleed blocks in there. These keep the pistons in place. If you don't have them, the pistons might fall out, and if they don't stay in place, then you can't have a successful bleed. So these will ensure a successful bleed. So now we are moving to the lever. We have to loosen the lever so that we can adjust it so that the bleed port, which is this little guy here, is facing up. And tighten that down so it doesn't move when we're fiddling around. And now we take a T15 Torx wrench. Take that off. Make sure you don't lose this or the little O-ring that is attached to it. See that little O-ring right there? And then we've got this bleed cup. And I'm going to screw this in. Make sure you don't cross thread the bleed cup. Most bleed cups are plastic and it is easy to cross thread them. You don't need to torque them down very hard, just enough so that they stay in place and create a bit of a seal. This is the same orientation I would put the lever and bleed cup in if I were just doing a gravity bleed, but we're doing a full flush today, so I'm not going to put any oil in this to start off with. Now it is time for the use of our Maxima mineral oil. We are going to be filling this syringe up to the 15 cc mark, which should be about enough to fill that bleed cup up top. So here we go. And this is blue. Now, as you can see, there is a decent amount of air in the syringe, and that is not something we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to bleed that out. There we go, until there's a nice steady stream flowing back into there. And then we will pinch this little guy so that there's no temptation of moving. Now that we have a filled and bled syringe, we're going to come to the bleed port on the caliper, and we're going to use our T15 Torx wrench to take this little guy out. And right before I take it fully out, I'm going to get my hose ready here, and I'm going to make the quick swap so that no excess oil gets spilled too far. Of course, this doesn't always work, but you can do your best. But there we go. Now we've got that threaded in. Keeps going. There we go. Now that is on there, and what I'm going to do, there is a plunger in the bleed cup that I'm going to take out at this point. This little guy. That opens up the system so that I can push through the oil. Undo this clip and begin pushing. As I push the oil from the syringe through the system, the cup is going to fill up, and as you can see, I've already filled up a little bit, and you can see how black it is compared to the green that we filled the syringe with. And it's going to just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. We're going to have to do this a few times because this system is in bad need of a flush. That is all that I've done in the syringe. I'm going to close that off. I'm going to put the plunger back in the cup. So now the system is closed again. It is safe for me to remove the cup and discard the oil into a waste bin or some sort of oil recovery area. So I think we are on our last fill of the cup. It's looking a little bit clearer now. Let's say that looks pretty good. It was a murky black, as you saw earlier, and it's still a little cloudy. Ideally, I would get it all the way to clear green, which, comparing it to my syringe here, it looks okay. So that was our last one, and let's walk you through what we need to do now. So I've put my plunger back in the cup, and now I'm going to release the syringe from the system and quickly replace the hose, which is always longer than I expect, with the plug. There we go. And there is a little bit of drippage going on, but I'm not too concerned about it. I'll clean it up in a bit. But here's our system. I am going to just release the excess oil back into the little container and we'll use it for next time. And now what we need to do is do a little bit of gravity bleeding to kind of get those potentially remaining bubbles out. And so now we're gonna go back up to the bleed cup and get that done. I like to do this a couple of times when I've finished a full system flush. I'll keep the bleed blocks in there for a bit, take this out, and just squeeze the lever a few times. Maybe tease the hose a little bit. Make sure any bubbles that I can get out will come out. And like I kind of expected, none came out at this point. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this plunger back in. I'm gonna go back to the back, remove the bleed blocks, put the pads back in, clean everything really well, put the pads back in, and bleed it, gravity bleed it again. Now that we've done a tiny gravity bleed with the bleed blocks in, I'm gonna take them out. I'm gonna take my isopropyl alcohol and absolutely slather it, everything in it, and then take my shop towel. Try to do something without lint, just so that there's less little particles that can get everywhere and potentially cause contamination or anything. And it looks better when it's clean, when it's lint free. Do not want any excess oil to be anywhere near your pads, because that is how you ruin pads and you ruin your ride and you just become sad. All right, so I'm putting my pads back in. After this, I'm gonna put the wheel back on and we'll get ourselves going on the gravity bleed when that's all done. Single speeds are a little bit different. And because I loosened all of the brackets and everything of the brakes, we're going to have to realign the brakes after I've done all the wheel realigning and chain tensioning, just so that we don't get horrible brake rub at any point. So we put the pads back in, we put the wheel back on, and now we get to recalibrate the brake system. I am going to take the plunger out, set it aside, and since the pistons were pushed out, it's going to take a few pumps to get them back in, the place that they need to be to actually hug the disc correctly. So here we go, one. Got a few going here. All right, it's starting to come in. And I'm not seeing much air in the brake line. So this is a pretty long brake line. I didn't cut it when I got it. So it might take a few pumps, but feels pretty good actually. So we got lucky with this one. We didn't have to sit here pumping it all day hoping that bubbles will come up, because the brake system already feels way better than it did before. And all we did was push some new oil through. So now I will take this plunger, put it back in, undo this cup, pour this oil out, set it aside, and then I've got to put the cap back on. And here's a little cap. Make sure it's nice and tight. There we go. Some will have a torque spec on them. I don't believe TRPs do, so just don't tighten them too much and it'll be okay. Alcohol. Nice douse. Good old clean. And as long as you have done all of the steps I just told you correctly, you have a fully bled brake. The last step is putting the brake back where you had it previously. In this case, it was right about there. I'm not too picky on this bike. And you're good to go ride your bike. Thank you for watching this Garage Files where I showed you how to bleed TRP brakes. If you have any suggestions for what we should do in our next Garage Files, please leave that in the comments below. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you're interested in the magazines that we put out every month, go to the link in the description below and sign up for your copy. We hope you have a fantastic day. We'll see you in the next one.